Hi, my name is Rodrigo, this is Ether, where we make digital content to help you live and grow as a Christian, and we have been doing a series on the book of Revelation. Admittedly, the book of Revelation is really intimidating, but a key part of understanding Revelation, and really any other book of the Bible, is understanding the genre that it belongs to. That's right, the Bible has genres. The idea of genres is not foreign to us. We completely understand genres when we consume other media, like, say, movies. Every movie genre has its own language and its own features that help with tell its story. You don't walk into a sci-fi movie or a drama with the same set of expectations and really trying to understand either of those stories. A sci-fi movie would use time travel, space travel, and outlandish technology to tell its story, whereas a drama will use emotions, tragedy, and heartbreak, love me, Rachel, love me, to tell its story. In the same way, every biblical genre has its own sort of language and features that help it tell the message that it is trying to tell. The book of Revelation belongs to the genre of apocalyptic literature, and in this video we're going to cover the different features and language that this particular genre of the Bible has. The first main feature of the apocalyptic genre is that it's written in very symbolic language. Now, we're going to do a whole video on the symbolism of the book of Revelation, so we're not really going to cover that in this video, but we are going to cover two other main features of the apocalyptic genre that are super important in us understanding what it is trying to tell. Another very important feature of apocalyptic literature is understanding that it is a very specific kind of prophecy. See, most prophecy in the Bible is really a warning of what could happen if people were not to repent. This is the case for like Jeremiah and Isaiah, for example. But on the other hand, apocalyptic literature describes a future that is certain to happen no matter what. Now, we tend to think that a book like Revelation is talking about the end of the world in a future that we do not really know when it's coming. But when you read the book of Revelation carefully, you very quickly get the sense that John, the author of Revelation, is talking about something that he seems to think is going to happen very soon. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of the prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. That the time is near is not just a figure of speech. John actually means that what he's talking about is going to happen soon. And see, this is where apocalyptic literature gets a little tricky, because in reality, it talks about the future sort of on two timelines. The one that is coming soon and the one that is coming later. To really illustrate this, let me use an example from another apocalyptic passage that makes things a little clearer. In Mark 13, Jesus is walking with his disciples and looks at the temple, and he tells them that it's going to be destroyed. As the temple is a central part of the Jewish faith, they very naturally ask the question of, when is this going to happen, and how do we know that it's happening? And Jesus answers their question. As far as the sign of when this is going to happen, he tells them to watch out for the desolating sacrilege. As far as when, he tells them, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. See, we know that the temple fell in 70 AD and that a lot of the people of the generation in question were alive when it happened. Jesus was indeed talking about events that were going to happen in the near future. What gets complicated is that wrapped into all this talk of the temple, there is also talk of a final end time that we don't really know when it is coming. He will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. This illustrates my point perfectly. Mark 13 is talking about a future on two levels. One that is near and that we know exactly when it's coming, and another one that is coming later, that we know is going to happen, but we don't know the exact time of when it is going to happen. And what is true for Mark 13 is true for all apocalyptic literature, including the entirety of the book of Revelation. as I said before, we tend to think that Revelation is talking in its entirety about the end of time, but the reality is that most of Revelation is actually talking about an immediate future from the perspective of John's original audience, and only some of it is talking about the real end times. Just to be helpful, it really is only chapter 20, 21, and 22, part of 22, that is really talking about the end times. And the majority of the book of Revelation is actually talking about, again, things that are going to happen in the near future from John's original audience's perspective. Now, you may be tempted to think that because of this, most of Revelation has nothing to teach us, but that could not be further from the truth, especially when you take into account the last feature that we want to talk about apocalyptic literature. The word that we use for apocalypse comes from the word apocalypto from the Greek, and we tend to mean by the word apocalypse the end of time or something that is cataclysmic in nature, but the actual word means to reveal something, which really bears the question of what is it being revealed in the book of Revelation. And what's being revealed, and this may be a very sort of obvious thing to say, but ultimately what is being revealed in the book of Revelation is God's perspective on human events. After this, I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open. And the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." See, the reason why the book of Revelation is super relevant to us, no matter what future it is talking about, is because in the book of Revelation, we're really getting God's perspective on the things that are happening around his people. The revelation that we get from John is the way that God looks at things, the way that he looks at history, the way that he looks at tragedy, the way that he looks at judgment, the way that he looks at his churches. There may be no better book in the Bible to really develop our spiritual mindset and our spiritual perspective than the book of Revelation. So just to recap, what we've covered in this video are two big features of the book of Revelation. One, that it's a very specific kind of prophecy, and us understanding what level of future each passage is talking about is super important in us understanding the book. But ultimately what we have to understand is that what we're learning in the book of Revelation is God's perspective on things. This is super important for us because God's perspective on things is eternal. The way that he looks at our world is really what allows us to be godly and what allows us to be spiritual. And this may be the greatest lesson that we have to glean from the book of Revelation. As I mentioned earlier in the video, our next video is going to be about the symbolism in the book of Revelation, which is a huge part of us understanding this book. So if you want to learn about that, please subscribe and make sure that you watch our next videos. And thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.